Rockfin. Let's go. Oops. What is happening here?
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. What's going on? Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesdays, Thursday, and Fridays. I'm giggling a little bit because I was thinking about something funny earlier before I went live. But welcome, guys. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And I want to go ahead and give some shout outs to people in the chat. Guys, we got a good show tonight. We are doing a call in after the show tonight. I'll remember to link that after we show the poll results. So let's get to it. What's going on? Angela says, good evening, awesome people. Hope everyone is having a great Thursday, almost Friday. Like button smash. Go ahead and Hawk smash that like button for me, guys. What's going on? Hannah G says, Sabby with a smile. Greetings, Red Rebel. Dahmer is personification of imperialism. We talked about that earlier today on the Sabby and JB show on RBN. Important discussion. What's going on? Username. The Ron DSA's title seems a little clickbaity. No, not really. We'll get into that story. Shout out to David. Only scabs and cops refuse to smash like. Ouch. What's going on? Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says Doobie Dore 2024. Greetings, Ben, who's also a Sabby member, says, hello, Sabby. Hello, Ben. Shout out to Delthea, who's a Sabby member, says, hello, all you beautiful people. I look at all the lovely people. I think that's how that song goes. What's going on? Sebastian says, hey, shout out to Gamer. Great to see you again. Gamer, I hope you enjoyed our video game discussion. Shout out to Dave, says doobie doo MFs. Oh boy. What's going on? Gore Son of None says gamer hi once again. Shout out to Casey, sends solidarity and fire. What's going on, Ashura? I hope there's going to be an accurate take, Seder. I hope there's going to be an accurate take, Seder, since the Vanguard mulling on their hate for Dore. Interesting. Shout out to Ali. Solidarity with protesters in Europe. We should follow on their footsteps. Yes, we should. I got to tell you guys, like the protesters in Europe, they do not play around. Like they've got people out in the streets by the hundreds, like calling for a general strike, which is what I would love for us to have here, to have that kind of turnout. What's going on? Kim says, hi, Sabby. Shout out to Take It Easy. I love your little picture there. The Vanguard lads weren't molding. It's the same legit criticism they have had for like a year. You're doing the cult-like Dore thing they talked about, LMAO. Don't know what that's all about. Shout out to Monarch, Evening Sabby, and fam. Greetings, Cool Blue. Paying attention to polls. Looks like Oz will beat Fetterman in PA. The Republicans will flip Senate with House. Now I tell you guys to pay attention to that. We were talking about that on RBN a couple of days ago, how the polls were changing. Told people that this overturn from the Supreme Court wasn't going to be the drive that they thought it would be to bring people out. But you'll still have to still wait and see, you know? What's going on? Dabby Dab says, hello, Sabby fam. Shout out to Desert Mantis. Hello, Sabby and friends. What's going on, Mastario? Finally made it to a live stream. Hi, all. Shout out to Kill Your Igorgis. Just came from RBN. Great stuff, Sabby and JB. That was an interesting stream. Not every day I get to talk about video games, but we went there. Shout out to Edward says, go get him, Sabby. Go get him, Edward. What's going on? Crone of Anarchy. Hey, gamer and everybody else. Like that Crone of Anarchy. Gamer, I told you you're really popular. Shout out to Butter Cookie says, happy day. Greetings, Lewis says, late but here. What is going on? See, Brass, Sabby effing Sabs. That'd be a cool like t-shirt, huh? I still have to get one of my t-shirts. I have to do that. I want to get the long sleeve one out of that's getting cooler. Shout out to Brandy says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Jenna says, Sabby Sabs. Shout out to Carrie. I'm watching whole running 14 miles. Shout out to you. I could never run 14 miles. You are doing the damn thing. Wow. And what's going on? Robert says, shalom, my sister. Shout out to Slenderman Fennel says, hello. And just like that, hello. Greetings, CBC voters, says at Sabby Sabs. What is going on, Sun Moon? I have a glass of wine and I'm ready for this. Shh. Get cozy, guys. Like I said, we're doing call-in after the show tonight, so it should be an interesting discussion. And shout out to Lady Alex M says, yo. Okay. Let's give a shout out to patrons and then we'll get into tonight's stories. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there, doing the damn thing. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. It really does help me out. I also know that I am behind on emails and I'm also behind on Patreon messages. I have the Activist Summit on RBN this weekend. Once I get through that, I'll be able to catch up on emails and Patreon messages. So if you've emailed me or messaged me, you're probably like, oh, is she going to answer this stuff? I've just been incredibly busy this month. It's been very busy, but we'll get there. We'll get there. What are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and share my screen here and let's take a peek at that thumbnail, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, tonight we are discussing Sam Seder. God, Sam Seder forgets. We are going to be bringing up Force the Vote again since Sam has brought that up. So Sam Seder, Brianna Joy Gray, and Jimmy Dore, we are revisiting Force the Vote and what Sam Seder has seemed to have forgotten. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss UK Prime Minister update. Another one in that DJ Khaled tone. That's right, another one. And last but not least, we're going to discuss Ron DeSantis arrest voters. What is that really about? And why is it problematic? So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with this Ron DeSantis story because I do think, I don't know if anyone else has discussed this yet. I haven't seen it discussed, but I think it's important that people know that this is going on. So shout out to Case Study QB here for this clip. Case is always doing the damn thing. What you're going to see in this clip, and then I'm going to go into an article and show you another clip afterwards. You are going to see people being arrested in Florida because of past votes. Now, these are people who have criminal record. They did their time. And to their knowledge, they didn't break any rules. They didn't break any laws. So how could something like this have happened? We're going to get into that. Let's go ahead and dive in to this clip here.
And they show that even the police making these arrests, even the police were confounded by the entire situation.
Apparently, I guess you have a warrant?
For what?
I'm not sure.
For voter stuff, man.
Oh my God, man, what?
Yes, sir. So unfortunately, right now, we're going to have to take you to jail.
Why is y'all doing this now and this happened years ago?
I don't know.
So let me pause it here. Notice that he said, why are you doing this now? And this happened years ago. So this gentleman here voted years ago, and he's now being arrested for it. It goes on.
I have no idea, man.
This shit crazy, man. Y'all put me in jail for something I didn't know nothing about. Why would y'all let me vote if I wasn't able to vote?
I'm not sure, buddy. I don't know.
So that's a valid question. If he was not legally allowed to vote at that time, why did they let him vote? You can also hear the confusion in the police officer's voice. They don't even really know why this is happening either. They just know that they have these warrants and they have to go serve these warrants and they have to arrest these individuals. They don't know the details behind it. They're just basically, I guess they're saying they're there just to do their job. But this is really strange. And it is happening in Florida. So if you live in Florida or you know someone that lives there, you need to pay attention to this, because I feel like this should have already been grandfathered in. I don't think you should be able to go back and now arrest people for voting years ago. But they continue to do it.
So, ma'am, do you have a warrant for your arrest?
For what?
For voter fraud?
I'm like, voter fraud? I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant. That's what it's for. Okay.
Oh, my God. This is a priority for the Desantis administration, which voting rights advocates say is creating a chilling effect across the state.
Okay, so I do want to explain here. I want to give a little bit more detail, because if you just watch that clip, that doesn't really go into the specifics as to why this happened in the first place. Now, before I get into this article, I do want to explain to you that Florida is a ballot initiative state, like my state, Massachusetts. Now, there are pros and cons that come along with BIs. In some states, depending on where you live, the governor can actually come in and overrule a ballot initiative and either revert it back to what the original law was or change it to something else. They can do that depending on the rules in your state. Apparently, in Florida, Governor Desantis can do that. Now, here's my problem. When it comes to, incidents and events that have happened, like I said, it should have been grandfathered in, that happened before the law was changed. Those people should have already been grandfathered in. That's how I look at it. But some of you may be wondering, how did it get to this situation to begin with? Let's dive in. In Florida, the right to vote can cost you. And they are 100% right about that. Now, this article is written by Gabriela Sanchez. Despite a state constitutional amendment restoring voting rights to most people with past convictions, Florida has done all it can to keep them from the polls. So this was one of those opportunities that they had before, and I'll go into it as well in the article, where they had a ballot initiative that would actually make it legal for people that had prior convictions. And I believe there's a limit to this, but prior convictions to be able to vote. Now that they're out of prison, they did their time, and they can go ahead and vote just like you and I could, right? But like I said, with ballot initiatives, there are pros and cons. And if you live in a state where the governor can overturn it, that can also happen. Let's see how this transpired, because I think that this should be a warning sign to people. Now, 55-year-old Kevin Bolton was arrested at a homeless shelter earlier this year in Gainesville, Florida. He was held on a $30,000 bond and charged with 3 counts of third-degree perjury and fraud. His alleged crime, voting with unpaid fines and court fees. So do you see the expense that this is costing people? $30,000 bond, 3 counts of third-degree perjury and fraud. So now you have people who have already served their time, who are probably, just trying to make their way back into their community and back into society. Now that they are faced with another possible, I don't know what I'm going to call it, stain, another possible stain on their record because of voting. So they're saying that these people committed voter fraud. But at the time, they didn't know they were doing that because the law has changed. Now, let's go into what the ballot initiative said, because this is the part where I think this needs to be explained. So we're going to start with in 2018. Let me break this down for you. In 2018, Floridians approved the Voting Restoration Amendment, known as Amendment 4, which aimed to restore voting rights to most state residents with past felony convictions who have completed their sentences. So as you guys know, depending on what state you live in, some states, like if you have a past felony conviction, you still can't vote. Florida was one of those states. So the people implemented this change to the amendment to make it so that those people with those past felony convictions can now vote after they have served their time. So they've already served their time. That was in 2018. Now let's go on. Amendment 4 put an end to Florida's categorical policy of lifetime disenfranchisement for felony conviction, a policy with clear fascist origins that was estimated to disenfranchise 1 in 4 Black men in the state. Supporters celebrated the amendment, which was estimated to expand the franchise to roughly 1.4 million Floridians. However, not even a year later, Florida's Republican-controlled legislature passed Senate Bill 7066, which bars people from regaining their voting rights if they have outstanding court debts related to a felony conviction. That was the case with Bolton. So essentially what you have here is you have people being punished for being poor. Because one of the things that I've brought up before about bail reform that is definitely needed in this country, some of the people that are sitting in jail aren't necessarily sitting there because they committed a crime. Some of the people sitting in jail are sitting there because they can't afford cash bail. So it's a system that punishes those who are poor, people who are in poverty. And now you have a similar situation where even when it comes to the voting rights, even though the people passed that amendment, they came in, they overturned it. The Florida Senate did. The Florida legislature did. And so now people who have passed felony convictions, if they don't have the money to pay past court debts, which a lot of them probably don't, especially if you just got out of jail and you're looking for a job and you're limited with what kind of jobs you can get, and you're probably not making a lot of money. Those people are now being punished because they don't have the money to pay for the court debts that they had if they voted before. See, this is the catch. So let's go on. Any law that requires people to pay to vote is fundamentally anti-democratic. But to make matters worse, I can't talk tonight. I'm sorry. To make matters worse, Florida makes it virtually impossible for people with past convictions to determine with certainty what they might owe. This is done on purpose, by the way. This is another way to keep broke people broke and to keep people in debt. When it says here that it's impossible for them to even be able to tell what they might owe, that is something that is done on purpose. There's a record of it somewhere, but they don't want to give the record to them. This is another way to send these people right back to jail, as if the prison systems in this country is not already overcrowded. You want to send people to jail because they voted. Let's go on. The state lacks a centralized database for tracking court debt and payments. So if the state lacks a central database for tracking court debt and payments, then how do they know who owes what? Why hasn't something like that been fixed? This doesn't make any sense to me. Again, this is on purpose, guys. So there is no easy way to verify court debts within the state's 67 counties or access data on federal or out-of-state financial obligations. Well, I guess I better not get any tickets in Florida. So they don't even know if their information that they have is correct. As such, many formerly incarcerated people don't know they have outstanding debts at all, nor are they aware these debts would render them ineligible to vote. And without a proper record-keeping system, state and local officials struggle to help individuals verify this information. So if you don't know if you owe any court debt, and if you don't know how much you know, how is this a fair system to arrest people under this law? Exactly, Stephen. Then how do they know who to arrest? That's what I'm saying. You don't have a centralized database, but you know who to go lock up. Somebody has a record somewhere. Moreover, those who do know the exact sum of their debt are sometimes no better off. See, this is where it gets worse. Political scientist Daniel Smith estimated in 2020 that 79% of Floridians with past convictions who have completed their sentences owed at least $500 in fines and fees. The challenge of paying off these sizable debts can be insurmountable, especially when considering that involvement in the criminal legal system tends to mean lower income. $500 may not mean much to some people, but to a lot of people, $500 is a lot of money. And if you just got out of prison and let's say you're working a minimum wage job, let's say you're working at the Waffle House. And I point to that example because the Waffle House is notoriously known for employing people that have, past convictions. So if you're working somewhere like the Waffle House as a cook, how are you going to come up with that $500? And you got to pay your rent. Oh, and by the way, you don't even know if you owe it. There's that too, because their database is messed up. This is another way to keep people in the system, in the for-profit prison system. The people being arrested didn't even know what they were being arrested for. The police officers arresting them didn't even know why they were arresting them. So here you have people who voted not realizing that if they owed court debt that they weren't supposed to vote. So then that goes to the voting system, right? Because how is it that I think they have machines in Florida. How is it that the machines or paper ballots, whatever they were using down there, how is it that the system, that doesn't kick in as a red flag when they went to vote? This is all by design. I don't buy it one bit. This is a way, again, to keep people in the system. Now, it goes on to say, of the top challenge of verifying and meeting the financial prerequisites, Floridians are also being failed by the Department of the State an office tasked with reviewing new registrations and flagging ineligible voters for removal from the rolls. Now, this article goes on. Eric, you can put that link to the article in the chat if people want to read the entire article. But there's also this video about it as well. Shout out to Case Study QB, where they go into even more detail. So it says, full discussion, Ron DeSantis and GOP subvert ballot initiative to amend Florida Constitution to allow felons to vote by passing a law that allows them only to vote if they paid their court fine and fees. Now arresting people who didn't know they couldn't vote. I don't even understand how this is legal. I really don't. And those two people they just arrested, how are they going to get out of jail now? Do they have $30,000 of bail money to get out? And even if they do, if they have a bail bondsman, someone that gets them out, they got to pay that $30,000 back. They're keeping you in debt, a slave to the system. Listen to this.
In 2018, Florida citizens easily passed a constitutional amendment to restore voting rights to convicted felons who had finished serving their sentences, accepting only those convicted of murder or felony sex offense. In 2018, that amendment was popular. It passed with nearly 65% of the vote.
So it passed with nearly 65% of the vote. The majority of the voters wanted this in place. So here you have the state legislator that came in, overrode it, and basically decided to go against what the voters actually wanted. So how do we have a democracy when the people, the figureheads who are sitting in the state houses, who are sitting in the White House, who are sitting in Congress, how do we have a democracy when they can just come in and override what the voters actually voted for?
And it applied to nearly 1.5 million Floridians. That constitutional amendment was a game changer, especially for Black Florida voters. That's because before the ballot initiative passed, more than 1 in 5 potential Black voters were barred from voting. That all changed with that landmark constitutional amendment in 2018, at least until Republicans got their hands on it. In 2019, the Republican-controlled legislature under Governor Ron DeSantis passed a law that allowed convicted felons to be eligible to vote only if they had repaid their court fines and fees, a sort of pay-for-play, if you will. The confusion over that change to the amendment, plus the fact that it was not made clear to convicted felons that if they were convicted of murder or a felony sex offense, then they could not vote, all of that has made it sort of a mess down in the state of Florida.
This is problematic because now it gets into the part where they're basically having to pay to vote. What happens if someone takes this to new extremes? What happens if someone takes this to extremes and say, all right, everybody, if you have student loan debt, you got to pay off that before you can vote? I mean, that's really extreme, but what if that happened? What if somebody came in and said, if you have medical debt, you have to pay that off before you can vote? What if they came in and said, if you have any type of debt at all, you have to pay it off before you can vote?
And it's against that backdrop that 2 months ago, Governor DeSantis held a big press conference to announce his crackdown on voter fraud in Florida, a crackdown that targeted a select group of voters. DeSantis declared that his newly created election police force had made a whopping 20 arrests. And those 20 arrests included people who were ineligible to vote. They were convicted of murder or a felony sex offense. The charge in those arrests is a third-degree felony. That kind of voter fraud calls for a sentence of up to 5 years in prison and up to $5,000 in fines. But the people targeted in this crackdown really seem to have had no idea that what they were doing, which was casting a vote, they had no idea that it was illegal, or at least that's what it appears to be in the videotape that we're about to show you, an honest mistake that is somehow grounds for them to be cuffed and taken to jail. NBC News has obtained police body cam footage from those arrests. They were first published by the Tampa Bay Times, and they show that even the police making these arrests, even the police were confounded by the.
So we saw that piece. So let me jump forward a little bit.
I'm not sure, buddy. I don't know.
So, man, we have a warrant for your arrest.
For what?
For voter fraud.
I'm like, voter fraud? I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant. That's what it's for. Okay.
Oh, my God.
This is a priority for the DeSantis administration, which voting rights advocates say is creating a chilling effect across the state. Joining us now is Jasmine Burney Clark. She is the founder of the voting rights organization Equal Ground, one that works to build Black political power in the state of Florida. Ms. Burney Clark, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell me what kind of effect this decision to pursue voting fraud on the part of Governor DeSantis, what kind of effect has that had on the community of Floridians who are newly enfranchised with the right to vote?
Certainly, this governor and his appointed election officials have moved the goalpost on voting every year since he has been elected. The creation of his multi-million-dollar election task force has police departments doing his bidding, which essentially detaches this governor from his reelection bid that he would benefit from these arrests. And it also absolves him from doing his actual job. So it should actually be that he's expanding voting access, but instead he's identifying statewide ways to apprehend individuals when there should be a statewide agency that connects individuals to understanding what their fees and fines are so that they can vote and they can register confidently and not in fear. This governor.
So I just want to jump in and say something here. You know, why do they have to be arrested, though? Why do the cops have to come and arrest them? And she's right in the sense that someone should be notifying them when they are released, what their fines and what their fees are. And someone should notify them about the law. Oh, by the way, this, and this. You know what I mean? But they don't have a system in place to do that because, again, like I said, this is done on purpose. Let's go back in.
Has stoked fear and has removed the confidence and created more confusion. Those are the impacts we're seeing on the ground in this state since those arrests started to take place under his task force.
When you talk about that loss of confidence and the creation of confusion, I mean, what can be done to counter this? Because it is effectively terrifying to people who may not be sure if they can vote, right? And just stay home come November. I mean, is there any kind of grassroots effort to help people that actually can vote and get them to the polls?
You know, we are 3 weeks away from an election here in Florida and across the nation. And we are also in a state where we have been grossly underfunded and supported to help voters get out the vote, particularly organizations like mine and others across the state. But there are limited resources that have been made available through organizations like the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, where bail funds have been created and legal assistance has been provided. We don't know how far those funds will take people, but they are an initial start, given the fact that there is just limited resources and limited capacity in this state to help support those. Quite frankly, this is probably one of the most inhumane acts we have seen or witnessed in this state under this administration.
Which is saying a lot and is also of a piece with Governor DeSantis, who often launches major policy prescriptions, if you will, with no clear implementation strategy. And that policy tends to be quite controversial. Jasmine Burney Clark, founder of Equal Ground, thank you so much for your time and your efforts.
Thank you.
So here's my take on this. This could be a grassroots effort. Don't get me wrong. You know, MSNBC is doing this because they want people to come out and vote for who, right? They want you to come out and vote Democrat. They have their own bias that they're dealing with, right? But what I will add is that this could be an example where like a grassroots organization can come in and fill in where the state is not. They could come in and fill in that gap and say, okay, you know, you were released from prison. This is what you owe in court fines and fees. Let me explain how this voting law works for you now. But here's the thing, like they just told you in that article, if there is no central database that has that information, then how are they going to get the information that will tell them who owes what and how much? And that's why I said this is done on purpose. Look, Those of you who work in IT, or those of you who are like software, like gurus, and you're really into like computer programming or whatever, I'm pretty sure someone can come up with an app or a database that is centralized that can connect all of that information. So that way, these people, when they are released from prison, they can have that information. The problem is the state doesn't want to do that. Let's just be real. The state wants to put those people right back in prison where they came from. That's the problem. But if you are one of those people that know how to do that, you can make an app or whatever. It would be good if there was like a group or organization that could go to the State Department there in Florida and say, look, we're going to take on this responsibility. We've created this app. We've created this database that'll connect all that information so you don't have this, because this is a waste of resources. You're having police officers go out and arrest people for voting. Shouldn't those police officers be out trying to solve crime, like serious crime? So that's a waste of resources to have people do this. Is absolutely ridiculous. And I sincerely hope, if you know someone that lives in Florida, please send this to them, because I sincerely hope that Floridians will not take this lying down. I hope that people will push back on this, because this is not okay. Now, whether you agree with, and here some people may come in and say, well, if they didn't do any crime, they wouldn't have been in jail in the first place, and then they wouldn't be in this situation. Yeah, tomato, tomato. But the point is, the people did their time and they are free and they should be able to vote. When the law changed, people should have been notified, and they should have been notified regardless if they had court fines that they needed to pay. Now, here's another part of the problem. A lot of times when people are released from prison, they don't have a permanent address, right? Some of them may stay at a halfway house. They may stay with a family member for a couple of months so they can get on their feet. So there needs to be a way to connect with them regardless. This is terrible. Like, should not happen. Should not. I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. JB says, hello all. What a long day. Good to see you all. Shout out to my comrade JB. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. It's worth mentioning that even if you go home with charges dropped, etc., the act of being arrested and handcuffed is humiliating, painful, and scary. Messed. Yeah, all over again. And then the neighbors, if there's neighbors outside, and guys, I used to live down south, people are nosy. And the neighbors outside looking at you, just sitting on the porch like, oh, there they go again, going back to jail, thinking it's something serious, and it's not. Rick says in Texas, they have state attorney general officers knock on doors to verify that it was you. And that happened to my then 70-year-old aunt. Isn't this crazy? JB says they overturned the will of the people. That's totalitarian. Yeah, that is a part of BI. So if you guys get a chance, there's a ballot initiative panel that I did a while back. It's on my channel. When you get a chance, watch that panel where it was like all of us that live in BI states, like CJ's on there, Ron Paclone's on there. I think wasn't one of the guys from Vanguard was on there, but like we all talked about how ballot initiatives work, and we talked about which states are BI states, and we talked about the pros and the cons. So definitely check out that panel. Robert says punishing people after punishing people is inhumane. Pat, those police officers should be out arresting pharma execs and their bribed politicians. The police are supposed to work for us. Raziel the Great, I live down here. Most people have no clue this is going on. I didn't know about it until this morning. So definitely share this, guys. They're just going to keep arresting more people. So if you have a loved one or a friend that you know that has been in the system and they've been released recently, please let them know about this. I'll take that comment that you have there. All right. Shout out to James, who's been a member for 6 months. Whoop, whoop. True progressives are fighting for the working class, but we don't have anyone like that in government or politics. So I answered no. Wow, 6 months already. Yes, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please take that poll. That is in reference to one of the later news stories. So go ahead and take that because I want to hear your responses. And that's going to lead into the call-in segment tonight. And I'll take that comment on Rockfin. I don't know who this. Oh, thank you for the tip, Dave. Nice to see Sabby breaking it down. I might send you an email about the truckers here. Also protest NATO and imperialists. Thank you so much for that, Dave. Okay, we're going into our next story. If you have not heard the news, the UK is having some difficulty. I talked to my friend that lives in the UK this morning. You guys may have heard me mention him before. I talked to my friend this morning that lives in the UK, and I said, dude, and he was just like, all I can say is that things just keep getting worse here. So it was only 3 months ago that I did a story here telling you about Boris Johnson resigning as prime minister in the UK. That was just 3 months ago. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back here again because the new prime minister, Liz Truss, it was announced this morning that she is also resigning as prime minister. I believe she's only been in office maybe a little over 6 weeks. Let's get into this story. What is happening over there? UK Prime Minister Liz Truss resigns after failed budget and market turmoil. You know what? This is something that doesn't happen here. Imagine if Joe Biden said, I'm going to resign because I failed economically with the country and the budget. One could dream, huh? Okay, here we go. There she is, Miss Liz Truss. She has decided to step down. UK Prime Minister Liz Truss resigned Thursday following a failed tax-cutting budget that rocked financial markets and which led to a revolt within her own Conservative Party. That sounds familiar. Truss was in office for just 44 days, making her the shortest-serving prime minister in British history. For 10 days of her premiership, government business was paused following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. So I'm going to skip the statement because I have the video of that I'm going to show you. The party is now due to complete a leadership election within the next week, much faster than this summer's 2-month period. Graham Brady, the Conservative politician who is in charge of leadership votes and reshuffles, I like that. What is your position here, sir? I'm the reshuffler. I reshuffle shit. Told reporters he was now looking at how the vote could include Conservative MPs and the wider party members. Now, Truss' resignation came after a meeting with Brady, who chairs the 1922 committee, the group of Conservative MPs without ministerial positions who can submit letters of no confidence in the prime minister. Just before the meeting, a Downing Street spokesperson told reporters Truss wanted to stay in office. So it sounds like she did want to stay, but people are not feeling the Truss. I'm going to stop making jokes here, you guys. I'm sorry. It's Thursday. I'm a little silly. During the hour the meeting lasted, the number of Conservative MPs publicly calling for Truss to step down reached 17. The number who had written letters to Brady expressing no confidence in the prime minister was reported to be more than 100 by Thursday. Yikes. The pound was up 0.6% on the day against the dollar at 5 p.m., trading at 1.128. It remains at the level it was on September 22nd, before Truss' market-moving budget. Gilt yields initially fell, but were later flat on the day. So you can see here the graph, pound rises on Truss' resignation. So there you go. Opposition parties, Labour, the Scottish National Party, and the Liberal Democrats called for an immediate general election on Thursday afternoon. Hey, that's today. Labour leader Keir Starmer said the Conservative Party has shown it no longer has a mandate to govern. Yikes. Now let's get into the story about the budget, because this is the piece that they say that really pushed people over the edge here. And if you're watching and you live in the UK, or you've lived in the UK, or you got fam in the UK, let me know in the chat. I want to hear from you guys about this as well. Controversial mini budget. I told you I can't talk tonight. It was that tea. Controversial mini budget. So here we go. On September 23rd, Trust Finance Minister Kwasi announced a so-called mini budget, which began a turbulent period for UK bond markets, which balked at the debt-funded tax cuts he put forward. Most of the policies were reversed 3 weeks later by the second finance minister, Jeremy Hunt. Truss beat Rishi to become the leader of the Conservative Party following the resignation of Boris Johnson on July 7th. Sunak is now one of the favorites to succeed Truss, along with Hunt, another leadership contender, Penny Mordaunt, Defense Minister Ben Wallace, and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The resignation leaves the status of the Conservatives' expected budget update on October 31st uncertain. But Truss said the leadership handover would ensure we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans. Now, I do want to jump in here for just a second and say, my friend in the UK told me that they don't know if they're going to be able to pay their heating bill. They don't know if they're going to even have enough heat because of the inflation, because of Russia, Ukraine. Like, all of this is connected. So that's what my friend was telling me, is like, we don't even know if we're going to be able to have heat here this winter. So there's a lot going on, and it's been a mess. It's been a mess with Boris, and you bring in Truss, and it's all over the place. They are having trouble finding a leader. We're going to skip the statement part again because that'll be in the video I show you. U.S. President Joe Biden said in response to the news, the United States and the United Kingdom are strong allies and enduring friends, and that fact will never change. I thank Prime Minister Liz Truss for her partnership on a range of issues, including holding Russia accountable for its war against Ukraine. We will continue our close cooperation with the UK government as we work together to meet the global challenges our nations face. Work together. So Joe Biden is saying, like, they're going to work together to meet the challenges, to meet global challenges that the nations face. But they can't, they struggling to run their own country right now, but they are struggling. They are in dire need of help right now. So how are they going to work together with you and say, okay, let's figure out how things should work for other countries, and they don't have their own country under control right now? Oh boy, I got to tell you, globally, it's crazy what is happening globally right now. Everybody, you're starting to see the West crumble. That's what's happening. Everybody paying attention to what's going on. The protests in France. There were protests in the UK as well. Like the West is crumbling. Someone just said $9,000 gas bills. Regaining trust. Paul Dales, chief UK economist as Capital Economics, said the new prime minister would need to do more to regain the trust of financial markets. I want to highlight this piece here. The new prime minister will need to do more to regain the trust of financial markets. What about the trust of the people? I think the new UK prime minister needs to gain some kind of trust of the people. Because right now, I don't think they're really trusting. I don't think they're too trusting right now with everything that has happened. Okay. All right. In just a few weeks, fiscal policy has swung from being ultra loose to less loose to outright tight. I'm in a silly mood tonight. I'm going to be nice, but I just don't understand why he had to describe it that way. Fiscal policy has swung from being ultra loose to less loose to outright tight. Oh, God. Okay. Overall, the resignation of Truss is a step that needed to happen for the UK government to move further along the path towards restoring credibility in the eyes of the financial markets. But more needs to be done, and the new prime minister and their chancellor have a big task to navigate the economy through the cost of living crisis, cost of borrowing crisis, and the cost of credibility crisis. Yeah, you're not looking too credible right now. Not looking too credible. So, and it goes on here to talk about what different people from think tanks are saying as well. Now, I do want to go ahead and play part of this clip here. I swear it was just 3 months ago we saw Boris Johnson standing right in front of the same door. This is crazy. Standing right in front of the same door. Let's listen to what she had to say.
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability. Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent, and our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. I was elected by the Conservative Party with a mandate to change this. We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a...
She just said, hold on. She just said they delivered on energy bills. Guys, I just told you, my friend in the UK told me they don't know if they're going to have heat this winter. So oh my God.
Vision for a low tax, high growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
That was a short, how long was that speech? 1 minute and 30 seconds. That was a short speech. I'm telling you guys, again, if you're just joining, she's only been in office. It's a little over 6 weeks and she's already gone. And it's not just her. We've watched this happen over the past year or so. Look at all these prime ministers that have resigned. Soon as inflation started, people were like, I am out. I am not doing this. Just one after another. See ya. Figure it out on your own. I'm out.
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Liz Truss, announcing she is stepping down, resigning about 6 weeks after taking office to begin with. Of course, Boris Johnson stepped down himself over the summer. Political upheaval in the United Kingdom. Let's bring back CNN's Bianca Nobilo for your reaction, Bianca, to this, frankly, stunning announcement.
Was it really that stunning, though? You got to love the way they frame things on CNN. This stunning announcement, considering all the things that have been happening in the UK, is it really that stunning, though?
John, this is stunning. A prime minister for 6 weeks. You'd think after the turbulence of the years that had come before that perhaps Britain would be in for a period of more stability, but certainly not. The prime minister...
More stability? Why would you think? Okay, let me stop. Let me let it play.
Said that she was elected on the mandate to address Britain's economic crisis, but that mandate was always slim, by less than 0.1% of the electorate, John. Now, the Prime Minister, I believe, might become the shortest ever serving Prime Minister. I know there was one deep in Britain's history who died unexpectedly after a period of weeks, but I think Liz Truss may be the shortest serving Prime Minister in these circumstances. She has acknowledged the pressure that has been building within her own party, the country at large. The last week saw polls come out putting her at the lowest approval rating of a Prime Minister ever. Other polls came out which showed that the Prime Minister and the people that elected her wanted her out, and they...
Imagine if our leaders in the United States, imagine if when they have a low approval rating, imagine if they resigned. Like when Joe Biden was polling at 40%, at one point even lower than that. Imagine if he said, okay, my approval rating's really low, I'm going to go ahead and step down. Kamala, you go ahead and run. You go ahead and lead.
Possibly wanted Boris Johnson in her place again. She then had resignations and more of her lawmakers coming out saying that it simply wasn't tenable for her to continue. The drip became a tidal wave of opposition to her staying in post. And what's happened today is the party grandees, the most influential members of the Conservative Party, the chairman of the party, the chairman of the powerful committee that chooses how prime ministers are elected, and her deputy prime minister and close confidant have all visited her in Downing Street. They've obviously discussed and acknowledged the political reality that she simply can't continue, John. And this was all set into another gear and largely precipitated by those chaotic scenes I was talking about last night that have led...
Let me just say something really quick here. And, with the parliament, right? With the parliament, they can push the prime minister out. Imagine if our Congress could do the same thing. They're saying, look, you're doing a really, really bad job with the economy. It's really messed up right now. You turn it around. You got this amount of weeks to turn it around. If you don't, we're going to ask you to step down. So for the people who are kind of being kind of shy about saying whether or not Joe Biden should be primary challenged or whatever, in the parliament, it wouldn't even be like this hush up. They would just say, look, you got to go. I read to you earlier, they had a letter. There was over 100 people that signed it that said, you got to go. Imagine if the politicians that we had in Congress had that same type of guts and that same type of voice and energy to say, you got to go. Now, Anthony said they can impeach. They can, but that is such a long, drawn out process, and it's a complicated process. And just because someone is impeached doesn't mean they're necessarily removed from office. Bill Clinton was impeached, but he wasn't removed from office. Right? No, Parliament just said, you got to go. Roll
Conservative
out.
Lawmakers to tell me and to tell the media that they were simply so ashamed, depressed, and horrified at what their party has become.
Bianca, let's stay on this for a moment if we can, and help the international and the United States audience understand what has happened over this short period of time. This was an administration that began, frankly, in turmoil with economic proposals that were wildly unpopular and were lashed out against by the economic system in the UK itself. So that was what set this all in motion. And then we got to the point where we are today. What are the possible implications now, really, for the rest of the world, for the United Kingdom, which has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine, of course, a key ally to the United States? What changes? What might we see there?
You know, he had to bring that part in, right?
John, you make an important point, because Liz Truss is both a victim and an architect of her political misfortune. A victim because she became prime minister at a time when the country was in deep economic turmoil. We've just had inflation figures go into double digits. That was announced yesterday, 10.1% in the United Kingdom over the last month. But
10.1% in the UK.
She also had a series of unforced errors. For example, that economic package which you referenced, which she announced after becoming prime minister, went a lot further and faster than what she'd promised in her leadership campaign. It had tax cuts for the wealthiest in the country, slashing of corporation tax, and other measures that deeply unsettled the markets and sent them into a spiral, causing the Bank of England to make this unprecedented financial intervention. It caused deep consternation within the party.
So she's saying that she's also a victim. Listen to this. So trials and tribulations of Liz Truss' tenure as prime minister since taking office September 6th. The Queen's passing, rising energy cost, but we knew that was going to happen though. The second one, rising energy costs, we knew that was going to happen. Pound loses value. S&P downgrades UK debt from stable to negative. Criticism from within her own party. Well, hell, Joe Biden's getting that. Scraps tax cut proposal after backlash. Okay.
It was very difficult to find any economists that could agree with the course that she was taking. And this made many within her party question not only her economic judgment, but also her political judgment. Because at a time when the country was grappling with this cost of living crisis, and a lot of people in Britain are wondering whether or not they can afford to pay both their heating and their food bills.
Told you. The cost of living crisis. And it's gotten to that point now. Now, obviously, if you're wealthy in the UK, this probably isn't going to affect you the way it would like someone who's working class or someone who's living in poverty, right? But it's gotten to the point, like my friend said, where you have to decide whether or not, am I going to buy groceries or am I going to pay for heat? I think it's interesting. She said she's a victim, though.
The Prime Minister announcing reducing taxes for the wealthiest and removing caps on bankers' bonuses. It's just very peculiar political decision-making and terrible optics. So after that happened, and then Britain once again looked...
Listen to what she just said here. Listen to this. This should be a red flag for people, a warning.
With this cost of living crisis. And a lot of people in Britain are wondering whether or not they can afford to pay both their heating and their food bills. The Prime Minister announcing reducing taxes for the wealthiest and removing caps on bankers' bonuses. It's just very peculiar political decision-making and terrible.
She said the Prime Minister was making tax cuts for the wealthy and removing the cap for bankers' bonuses. No cap. Tax cuts for the wealthy. I hope this is a big warning sign to other countries. What happens when you invest? You don't invest in the working class and the poor people. She's going to give tax cuts to the wealthy during a time when the country has 10.1% inflation?
Optics. So after that happened, and then Britain once again looks like an unstable partner and an unstable ally. This has been a motif and a reoccurring theme since Brexit, that sometimes the country can't be trusted. There have been promises from Boris Johnson to break international law and others. In terms of where Britain finds itself now, in a deeply embarrassing and unstable position. And this has been the concern from lawmakers within Liz Truss's own party. They can see how this is being interpreted, not just by this country, but the world at large. Britain had been playing an influential role in Putin's invasion of Ukraine. It's a key partner to the United States and is an important part of that transatlantic alliance and still does have a major role to play in Europe and on the continent. But when we're having a revolving door of prime ministers and chancellors and home secretaries, clearly it's a very difficult partner to engage with. And there has been shock and consternation on the continent as well about what is really happening here in Britain. And we even had Joe Biden speaking out last week, expressing his concerns about the policy direction that Liz Truss was taking. And as we both know, that's quite unusual for a president to do and to remark of a key ally.
All right, Bianca.
Okay, so one of the things I do want to say here that I found to be pretty interesting is that she continued to say over and over, this is a key ally, for the United States government. I mean, when you have a high, this turnover rate of prime ministers, it's not like you're having a turnover rate of people in other positions in parliament. It's the prime minister. It would be like if we had 2 different presidents this year. And the new president has only been in office for 6 weeks and he's like, all right, I'm gonna tap out. That's what it's like. Like, this is crazy. It makes it look unstable. I'm gonna go to some of these comments and let me know if there's any on Rockfin, Eric. Where he says, Truss is sus and her career bit the dust. LOL. Thank you for the super chat, Derek. Truss is the latest victim of the curse of Zelensky. It'll keep happening until someone stands up to US/NATO sanctions. You go. Who's next? Thank you for the super chat, Luis. Why they won't allow fair elections in the UK? What are they so afraid of? Good question, Luis. Warren Fry, I can't wait to see how New Cappy, the next Brit prime minister, is. I don't know, man. I hope, I sincerely hope that they get someone who can actually help the people, working class people and poor people, not giving tax cuts to wealthy people. Delthea says, life is hard when your economic policies tank your currency and all your cronies just whistle and walk away. Ashura, Sabby Sabs, what was in that tea? Are you drinking JB's favorite? Oh, I just had green tea. That's all. That was all. Bill, they resigned before facing a vote of no trust. We don't have that in the US. We have impeachment, which is a much higher hurdle. That's right. That is right. JB, Truss did what conservative presidents do here in the US. It's funny how it's a red line in the UK, but it's standard here in the United States. That's a good point, JB. That is a really good point. And it's not called out as much when it's done here. Stephen, she already did the most important part of her job, tax cuts for the rich. There you go. And I guess, I don't know if that can be reversed or not. I mean, it's already been done. So maybe it can't be reversed. It's just, I can't. Okay. We're going to go into our final story tonight. So I can't believe we are bringing this up again, but we are bringing this up again because Sam Seder brought this up again. And I think we need to revisit Force the Vote. So recently, and you guys sent me this clip, recently Sam Seder was on Majority Report and there was a caller who called into the show and they had some things to say. And I really wish at some point people can talk about maybe some of the disagreements that they had about Force the Vote without blaming Jimmy Dore. And what was really interesting is that Sam Seder says in this clip that for some reason, all of a sudden his memory has failed him. Because Sam Seder doesn't remember having this discussion. I kid you not. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. But we're going to get into this clip. You got to hear this. So just keep in mind, again, a caller called in. So just keep that in mind.
you had a period of time when all of these IDW people, it would just be a sort of like revolving circle jerk. Ben Shapiro would show up on Rubin's show. Rubin would show up on Shapiro's show. The Weinstein brothers would show up on Rubin's show. He would show up on their show. Sam Harris would go on their show, et cetera, et cetera. You'd see it on the, in the more like Daily Wire stuff, they'd all get together. And what would happen is, the reason why this builds an audience is because you as an audience member, you keep circling around. And not only that, you think that you're hearing different opinions, but they are all basically an extension of each other. And they're just basically, they're almost like confirming each other's bias.
Isn't that the same thing that you get with the TYT network as well? Isn't that the same thing that you get when you watch all these shows that are on the TYT network? You can literally watch Humanist Report, Majority Report, TYT, what's that other one? National, Rational National, and they have the same stories and they have the same talking point. I kid you not. And I know this because I used to watch those shows, especially during like the Bernie campaigns. I used to watch those shows and I could literally watch like Humanist Report, and then I'd go to National or Rational, whatever the fuck. I'd go to Rational National, and it would be the exact same stories that Humanist Report did and the same narrative. Isn't that the same thing?
And confirming it for an audience member. But I'm curious about the hand that feeds you, because there is also an awareness, and you see it a lot in this like sort of YouTube culture, that like, I'm not going to express something because I can't afford to burn this bridge on a social level, because it's really a business relationship.
Isn't that the same relationship that you have with the progressives in Congress? Doesn't Sam Seder and Emma Vigilant do the same thing when they are trying to criticize these progressive members in Congress, and they give them these softball interviews when they do come onto their show, like the one that they had recently with Ilhan Omar, that soft ass interview? Don't they do the same thing so that they can keep their access to those politicians so they'll continue to come back on the show? So he's criticizing people for doing the same thing that he does. Huh.
And so you see it amongst those people. All those force the vote people were just having each other on each other's shows as a way of sort of like creating that same dynamic.
All the force the vote people were just having each other on each other's shows to create that same dynamic. Whenever you are organizing some type of direct action, you need to have all the people on each other's shows, because that's how the message spreads. You get more viewers to tune in to know that this is happening. That's how you create the awareness. That's how you reach a larger audience. So, for example, it's the same thing with the Assange protest, right? Like Misty came on my show. She came on RBN. She went on the Jimmy Dore show. Like, that's what you do. When we did the marches for Medicare for All in this country last year, we were different people, different organizers were going on to different people's shows to let more people know these events are happening. It wouldn't make any sense if you're a part of Force the Vote and you guys are only going on to one person's show. So like you guys just decide, okay, we're all just going to go on to Bad Faith and that's it. Okay, but what about the Jimmy Dore audience? What about, well, they didn't want to talk about Majority Report, but what about the Majority Report audience? What about the TYT audience? What about that's why it's important that you go on to different shows so you can spread the message to different people. But listen to this.
And, I don't know that I went on anybody's show ever to talk about Force the Vote. I guess it's conceivable I was on somebody's show who asked me a question about it. But I just go on random shows based upon, and in terms of the people we bring in, I rarely bring in commentators on the program. We do that on Friday. And it's just sort of like a specific, it's probably antithetical to the business, any type of business, good business sense. But it just, that's what we do. But I'm curious about like, when they said, don't bite the hand that feeds you, like what context was that?
So if you missed that part, Listen to what he says.
Guess it's conceivable I was on somebody's show who asked me a question about it, but I just go on random shows. Know that I went on anybody's show ever to talk about force the vote.
So Sam Seder just said, I don't know if I never went on anyone's show to talk about force the vote. You know, it's interesting. I don't know how Sam doesn't remember, but I remember. And you might remember. And I don't understand how he doesn't remember having a debate about force the vote on bad faith. Now, how do I remember this, but Sam doesn't remember it and he was there? Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that and see, what did Sam Seder say here? Because I just want to remind you, since he said he don't remember, he ain't going no show to talk about force the vote. Let's go into this. By the way, this segment is over 3 hours, but he don't remember. So let's help Sam remember.
But you and Young Turks together take up an enormous amount of that space. Jimmy has his own platform.
I have no idea what their perspective on this was.
Okay. And then in terms of beyond the left media space, who else has influence in the left media? Well, there's unions and there's the DSA, right? And so if Young Turks takes up, I don't know, probably 80% of the left. I don't know how big they are, but obviously they're the main player. If Young Turks comes out against an idea, if you come out against an idea,
I didn't,
or you decline to support it. And Sam, I think you're not being entirely honest about the kinds of things that were said on your show, even if you personally didn't say that. I'm not holding you responsible for them, but the Sam Seder universe was extremely antagonistic toward force the vote.
I think it was, frankly, for me personally, I was antagonistic to the idea that it very quickly, very, very quickly turned into AOC is a sellout. She's a fraud.
That's not fine, Sam, but I'm sitting.
But wait a second, Brie. You asked what the cost is? The cost is that.
No.
There you go. So Sam goes on to say here, you asked me what the cost is. The cost is that. So Sam was more concerned about people saying that AOC is a sellout. He was more concerned about that than them doing their damn job. That's what he was more concerned about. He was concerned about the optics. How does it look to people? What will people think? What will people say? He was more concerned about a politician's image than he was about that politician doing her job. Keep that in mind. Hold on to that piece.
No, I didn't ask you.
And I'll tell you something. I have historical perspective on that. We have, for the first time, we have taken out more establishment Democrats in the past 2 years, not exclusively because of her, obviously Injustice Democrats.
I really just wanted to make the point that I was making, though, which wasn't about any of that. And I would like to say my name is Brianna Joy Gray, not Jimmy Dore. So I would think we should talk about and can talk
about force the vote.
Okay.
And there's
if I can finish the sentence, I think that we can and should talk about the effect of the approach that Jimmy Dore took. But in this statement that I'm making right now, what I'm trying to say is the argument that was being made is not that you have all the control in the world, but there was an enormous resistance that I'm not saying coordinated as though it was planned, but all the big players were either silent on the issue or were anti-force the vote for whatever reason. Okay.
Now let's talk about this for a second. You know, obviously he was going to bring Jimmy Dore into this. You know, my whole thing is with Sam Seder, if you had a problem with the strategy, then just talk about the problem that you have with the strategy. But when you start bringing in, well, Jimmy Dore this and Jimmy Dore that, what does that have to do with the actual strategy? And to this point, Brie is correct in reference to the people who had the largest platforms at that time. Who was it? Jimmy Dore, right? And also TYT and Majority Report. Now, if TYT, I'm sure, would have joined on to this and say, yeah, we think this is a good idea. You guys should do it. Come on to TYT and talk about it. You know, maybe the squad would have felt even more pressure and maybe they would have, maybe even one of them could have attended that town hall. But because you had TYT and Majority Report running cover for them, not doing their job, they were able to ignore it. You see how that works? And yes, Secular Talk was a part of that too, and also has a large audience. But I'm talking about TYT has over 5 million subscribers. Majority Report has over, I think they're over 1 million. I think they're at 5 million. Anyway, they have millions of subscribers. They were the largest outlets at that time. And they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. So then you get mad, then they get upset when all of these people in left space choose to get together and do this on Jimmy's show. Well, you guys didn't want to do it. You didn't agree with it. Not only did you not agree with it, Cenk Uygur and them, they smeared it. So you want to get upset because somebody else took the initiative that you failed to take. That's what this is really about. That don't make no sense to me. Imagine the impact it could have had if you had TYT and Majority Report also joining along with Force the Vote. Because the progressive members of Congress, they still go on to Majority Report. They still go on to TYT. They're not coming on to these other shows. You see what I mean? So that would have put more heat on them, but they didn't want to do that because they want to be their friend.
Okay. And what that does ultimately is take what could be a spiral of energy and natural enthusiasm that came up around the idea and deflate it. So you can't be suppressing an idea, which you can agree with suppressing the idea. It's your right. It's your show. It's your platform. But the DSA declined to weigh in.
I'm not the DSA.
That's fine. But the DSA declined to weigh in. The nurses union declined to weigh in. Young Turks was antagonistic to it as an institution, even though 80% of its viewership supported the idea.
And that was another thing too. The majority of TYT's audience supported Force the Vote. They went against what their own audience wanted them to do. They supported it. And Cenk and Anna went against it. And not only went against it, but they went on to smear it. DSA decided not to chime in, which is hilarious because it's DSA strategy. It's in the DSA handbook.
And you did too. So it feels a little unfair to say nobody showed up, and not you, but other people were mocking that idea after having worked so hard to stem the natural organic tide of enthusiasm around it.
Okay. Well, it is impossible to separate Jimmy from this. You said yourself, you heard about it from me, which I got it from Jimmy. Jimmy is the first name outside of Nancy Pelosi's on the forcethevote.org. For a long time, there was two supporting agents, and the first one was Jimmy Dore's logo down there.
It was on his platform, Sam. Did you want to have the Majority Report logo on there? Would that have made you feel better if it was Majority Report's logo that was on the Force the Vote announcement? Because this just kind of sounds like jealousy.
Jimmy Dore turned this into a litmus test for progressives as to whether they were actually on our side.
Which it should have been, because again, like I said, the strategy is in the DSA handbook. They're DSA members. Yeah, it should be a litmus test. They weren't doing anything, Sam. They still not doing anything. Oh, you're not supposed to put any pressure on them? We're not supposed to tell them to do their job. We're just supposed to kiss their ass because they're supposedly the best that we have? Is that what we're supposed to do? We can criticize every other politician, but we're not allowed to criticize the progressives, even if they're not doing their job? Okay.
And you asked about the cost. And when it became clear to me that this was going to cost a lot more, like I say, I was open to the idea from a perspective of 1,000 flowers bloom. I didn't necessarily think it was the greatest thing in the world. I thought maybe there were other asks that you could get. But as soon as he took the energy and it was all emanating from him and around him, he was on every one of those conversations. You mentioned Sirota and conversations that you had. He was in I didn't see all of them, but all the ones that I did see, he was there.
So let me get this straight. You decided not to participate in an action because of who was going to be there. The conversation that Jimmy Dore had with David Sirota was on Jimmy Dore's show. So you decide not to do this strategy that's in the DSA handbook. You decide not to do it because it involves Jimmy Dore, and you didn't want to be associated with Jimmy Dore. Really? And he's not the only one. I'm going to show you a clip from TYT2 for another example where they've done the same thing. So you're willing to not even participate in an action for Medicare for all, which you're supposed to be 100% for, because of who is involved. This is exactly why the left doesn't win. This is exactly why. And I'm going to bring up a class aspect to this as well, because I'm going to let you know right now. The left is losing the working class. I don't know if Sam knows that. I don't know if Sam Seder knows working class people. But the left is losing the working class. And it was a lot of those working class people that donated money to progressive members in Congress, that donated money to Bernie Sanders when they really did not have it to give. And those people are sitting back and they're seeing that these progressives have not materialized in the way that they said that they would. They are seeing that these progressives are not fighting for them. And they're seeing that these progressives are just going along with the Democratic Party and the corporate establishment in the Democratic Party. They're seeing that these progressives sold out. And so I'm going to say this and I'll make this statement here and people can take it however they want. But I'm going to let you know, if this space does not have some type of apology, some type of reconnection with the working class, the left will never win in this country. I'm going to say this again. Until there is some type of apology, and there also needs to be some type of healing, a healing process with this as well. From the professional managerial class in this space, with the working class people who gave their last $5 and $10 to these progressive candidates, until there is some type of healing from that, the left will never win in this country. Just keeping it real, because your Sam Seders are not going to be enough to actually have a win in this country. It's not enough. It's the working class people. Remember, they ran grassroots campaigns. It was a lot of working class people that got them elected.
There was 5 or 6 other people. He was there dominating the conversations. And this turned into a project for him. And it was, I don't know on that Slack that I saw the images on that Slack. I don't know how representative that was, but it at the very least captured what I found to be problematic of it. And I thought that was the cost, because from my perspective, having had my historical context, I have watched for 15, 20 years an inability to primary Democrats who are establishment Democrats or conservative Democrats. Donna Edwards, I think, was the last one that we saw, and that was in 2006, maybe. And that was a big deal. And I don't even think she was that far to the left, frankly, relative to where people are today. And yet, the central figure, and if you go back and you look at too, like things like, if you look at the reporting on the Energy and Commerce Committee that AOC was shut out of because she was doing that primary. Had that, I think there was a couple of articles that made the point that had that vote been public, they would have been very nervous about voting against her. And
so let me get this straight. Basically what he's saying is, because he's watched for 15 to 20 years no success, or before this movement, no success with people primarying these corporate Democrats. Basically, what he's saying is we shouldn't be hard on the ones that got through. That's basically what he's saying. Now, first he told you that the cost was AOC being called a sellout. Now he's saying that the cost is Jimmy Dore. So he was focused on personalities instead of focusing on the strategy.
That means that the value and the power that she has to do with her Twitter following, her capacity to raise money, her popularity on the left, and to go after that and fundamentally undercut that. And if I have power, Jimmy Dore has more power. And to undercut that and for the sake of a losing vote where supposedly it was about 2 years later, you're going to primary those people, although she is the central figure who are helping primary those figures. It did not make sense to me. That was the cost.
See, what did I tell you? He didn't want you to criticize them. That's why he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it because he knew 9 times out of 10, they weren't going to force the vote. And then if he was a part of force the vote and the progressives did not force the vote, then he would have to be critical of them for not doing it. That's why he didn't want to do it.
As far as arguing whether, and that was the cost of the force the vote movement, whether there was a cost for the Progressive Caucus or those 15 people to vote against Nancy Pelosi. I also have an argument. I don't know if I buy it, but I mean, I'm not a sitting congressperson, but let's say Nancy Pelosi says, fine, don't vote for me. They lose the speakership, right? Because there's no one going to coalesce around. You're not going to get that 218 people to coalesce around another person. They're going to end up, it's going to end up being McCarthy because
that was not true. And you know who else had that same talking point? They came back and corrected it, but it was too late by the time they did. You know who else had that same talking point? Cenk Uygur said that same thing. So this was an example of Sam not doing his research. And there's been multiple times we pointed this out on the show where he'll just say shit on Majority Report. And I'm like, did he actually do the research about that? And then you go look at the research and you're like, he's not even, what is he talking about? This isn't even true.
That's just not true, Sam. That's just fundamentally not true.
Walk through this.
And that's
I'm going to give you my scenario about this. I'm going to give you my scenario. They say, no, we're not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi. We're going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And if you got what was the 218 to 212 or something, right? What I can't remember.
I believe it was 216 to 212 with a majority of 215 because if memory serves, 429 votes were cast, requiring a majority of 215.
So you now.
So see, Sam didn't even know. Dude had to tell him the numbers. Sam didn't even know. This is what I'm talking about. He just went on here and just said stuff that wasn't even true. Mary brings up a good point. By attacking Jimmy, Sam is missing the target, the politicians themselves. Jimmy is the scapegoat. But that's on purpose, Mary. That's what I'm saying. He didn't want to target the politicians. He didn't want to criticize them at all. That's the thing. That's why those progressive politicians will come on to Majority Report. You don't see them going to other people's shows. Even when Bernie came on Crystal and Kyle and Friends, what did he do? He kicked Kyle off the damn show and said he couldn't be on there because Kyle had criticized him. Notice people start changing their rhetoric after that happened, right? We need to be nicer to them so they'll still come on my show. Come on.
Had at the time, I believe about 219, 220.
The progressive holdouts, let's say there's 10 of them. Okay, they vote for Hakeem Jeffries. What it has to be less than that because the majority is not the majority of people who are voting. It's the majority of people who vote for a named candidate, right? You know this.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, okay, so let's say Nancy Pelosi calls their bluff. Don't vote for me. And they vote for Hakeem Jeffries. It goes into, enough of only like 4 of them vote for Hakeem Jeffries so that there is no majority. They have to revote, right? Yeah. And then what happens? either they have the same vote that they had before, or they switch to Pelosi, or they maybe other people vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
They could have continued to force the vote, Sam. See, how could you go against something and you didn't even know? Like, you could tell he didn't even know what the result would be. They could have continued forcing the vote. We could have been still forcing the vote today.
So
But
it goes to a second ballot.
It goes to a second or third or fourth or
round
of voting.
Second round. Now you have 15 people who vote for Hakeem Jeffries, 215 who vote for McCarthy, and 205 who vote for Nancy Pelosi. What happens then, Virgil?
Wait, hang on. Why would if memory serves, McCarthy
So
got
these
212 votes? So you're not saying that number goes up?
No, I'm suggesting in round two, one of two things
nobody
has
can
to happen.
nobody can marshal a majority, so it goes to round three.
No. You don't need you need a plurality of names.
That's not true.
It would
That is
require
not true.
Democrats would have to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be speaker. Or a large number would have to abstain altogether.
Yes, or abstain. Under your scenario, Sam, you need a majority of the people voting for a name.
Okay, so let's
say not voting present, which means that if every single Democrat shows up and they vote for someone, then unless they have a majority within that caucus, I'll say it's not a majority, and this is again assuming the Republicans voted as a bloc and they are a minority, and no Democrat is going to vote for McCarthy, obviously, then it's
so like what Sam said didn't make any sense. Why would the Democrats vote for Kevin McCarthy? They wouldn't vote for Kevin McCarthy. So what he said just didn't make any sense. I didn't understand that.
It's just going to keep going to successive ballots.
Right.
And this is not an unprecedented situation.
Right.
It's simply a situation we've not had in 100 years.
And importantly, this could go on for dozens of rounds, as it did in the historical precedent that Virgil is nodding to. And this is where we start to talk about media attention and spectacle, where Nancy Pelosi, who 3/4 of Americans want to step down, a bipartisan majority of people can't stand Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, who was down.
We're going to talk about Democrats because the Republicans. The Republicans are irrelevant.
Yeah, it's like half of Democrats want her. I think it's a majority of Democrats want her to step down. So the question is, isn't this part of the spectacle that we're trying to create around the issue of why 15 million people just lost their health insurance and what the government is going to do about it in this moment? So we don't end up in a situation where Joe Biden is saying, let's do more COBRA payments. Let's give more giveaways to the private insurance industry. And even if it doesn't result, obviously, in Medicare for all tomorrow, what it does is finally force has the best chance of forcing a conversation on this issue that I can imagine happening at all. So unless we give an alternative of how we're going to force
the subsequent things that followed that vote probably would have sucked up a lot of that attention.
Well, we don't know, Sam, because they never did it. And because shows like yours didn't put any heat on them and didn't even ask them to do it. Didn't even ask them to do it. Not one of them showed up to that town hall. And you had all these people in left media that really promoted them, that really, helped their campaigns. Let's be real. Mainstream media wasn't helping their campaigns. And not one of them could show up.
Yeah, no, you didn't know that, of course. You didn't know that, of course, before the force the vote. But presumably, over those days, you would have probably still paid more attention to the insurrection in the Capitol. Right. Now you don't know that because you don't know how things are going to play out. And
they could have scheduled the hearings for any time also.
Well, I'm saying the spectacle that would have come from that vote on the 4th would have been would have ended, of course, on the 6th. And
sure, but again, we didn't know that at the time. We couldn't know that at all.
No, of course. I mean, and then you also would have held up the vote for, I guess, to certify the vote, right? I mean, how would we do that?
Your question is, how do we certify the vote because there was a job that we didn't know was going to happen?
No. I'm saying in terms of we haven't organized, we don't have the Speaker of the House yet at that point. But my point is like the assuredness that the force the vote people had enough so that the Progressive Caucus members who didn't do what they said were sellouts, to me, I'm sorry. I just think that's ludicrous.
Okay, so no, it's not ludicrous. It's not ludicrous. The number one issue they all ran on was Medicare for all. So we were in the middle of a pandemic, and they weren't willing to force the vote for Medicare for all during a pandemic. So saying that they're frauds and calling them sellouts, no, it's not ludicrous. And no, it's not ridiculous. Like, what were they there for, Sam? If they just go along with what Nancy Pelosi wants, what are they there for? And regardless if there was this force the vote town hall or not, they should have been rejecting Nancy Pelosi as speaker from the get-go because she's the corporate Democrat, which was one of the principles on Justice Democrats that they had laid out for their principles, is that they were supposed to go in and go against the corporate Democrats. So they should have been challenging this vote for speaker for Nancy Pelosi, regardless if there was a force the vote town hall on Jimmy Dore's show. You see the problem? It's really sad in a way, because it's like, yeah, you have them there, but it's like this illusion. They present this illusion to make people think that they're fighting for them, but they're not actually fighting for them. So I don't know. Are you better off having them there or not having them there if they're not going to do anything, do what they're supposed to do?
I never even criticized the force the vote until it became apparent to me it was part of Jimmy's sort of project, to attack the Democrats and particularly the progressives. I mean,
so he didn't want the Democrats to be attacked. You guys caught that, right? He didn't want the Democrats to be attacked. He didn't want the progressives to be attacked. That's what this was really about. Sam Seder doesn't want you to be critical of them. He didn't want you to criticize. So at the end of the day, he's still like running cover for the Democratic Party. This is what he was doing.
He did that when she was elected, before she even won the general election. He attacked AOC for endorsing Andrew Cuomo in the general election. I mean,
well, she shouldn't have endorsed Andrew Cuomo. Again, why was she endorsing a corporate Democrat? Do you see the problem?
I've been duped.
My name's Brianna, and regardless, Jimmy Dore could go and kill 15.
You brought up the DSA, you brought up nurses, you brought up the media, you brought up David Sirota.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get this sentence out, we can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in force the vote. So there are ways that I think we can talk about the effect of Jimmy Dore's argumentative style on this discourse.
Well, it's not an argumentative style.
Okay.
I don't mind his style. I think that when you put out and make the argument over and over again that she's a sellout and they're a fraud, I think that does damage.
We can, and we should talk about that. But that's different than making an argument for why force the vote is good or bad.
So he doesn't want you to have that criticism of them because he said it does damage to them. But it's okay for them to do damage to working class and poor people. Let's get that straight. He doesn't want you to do damage to members of the squad for them not doing their job. But it was okay for them to vote for legislation and to not use their leverage to hold up legislation to do damage to working class and poor people. That was okay. You see the problem? Now this goes on. It's a much longer discussion. If you guys never saw this, watch it. Like I said, it's like 3 hours long. It's like 3 hours long. But this goes to a class issue, because I want to show you the same thing with TYT right here. When we talk about direct action and about them choosing to promote certain events that are progressive ideas and issues, and them choosing not to have anything to do with it because it's connected to Jimmy Dore, who they don't like, that's not real. And I'm going to show you another example here with TYT. Now here, Anna Gasparian is going to bring up the marches for Medicare for All. And you know what was funny? Like, people told me, they were like, TYT probably doesn't even know about the marches for Medicare for All. I was like, they knew about it. Because last year I was in the organizing DM group. I saw all the people they contacted. I know everybody that was contacted. So whether organizers were a fan of their show or not, a lot of people, most of them, if you had a left media show at some point or another, you were contacted about it. Plus, it was all over Twitter. We had marches all across this country. Do you think TYT reached out to any of the organizers for the March for Medicare for All and brought them on their show? No, they didn't. You know who did? Jimmy Dore did. Listen to this.
Recently, there was a Medicare for All march. It was nationwide. I think marches like that are wonderful. I think that kind of action is important to show the popularity of Medicare for All. The only thing that's unfortunate is you have people like Jimmy Dore serving as keynote speakers, which discourages people from wanting to take part in these efforts, which is.
Listen to what Anna just said. First of all, you're revealing yourself. You're really revealing yourself.
Into the streets and offering up these unhinged threats to members of the squad. Recently, there was a Medicare for All march. It was nationwide. I think marches like that are wonderful. I think that kind of action is important to show the popularity of Medicare for All.
She thinks that was important to show the popularity of Medicare for All. She thought like direct action was awesome. But she did not. If she thought it was so great and so important, why didn't she bring Savage Joy on her show to promote it? Don't like Joy? Okay. Why didn't she bring on Ricky to promote it? Any of the organizers, any of them. Why didn't they bring them on TYT to promote those marches? Do you know how many people we could have had at those marches? If they had even brought them on for 5 minutes? To talk about it? So she revealing herself. She letting you know she knew about the marches. She just chose not to let the organizers come on and talk about it. And this piece right before it, this is her also showing you, just like with Sam, she don't want you to criticize them. Listen.
For Democrats, and are they helping Nina Turner? No. In fact, they're discouraging people from supporting Nina Turner and also taking to the streets and offering up these unhinged threats to members of the squad.
Taken to the streets. Threats and critique are two different things. And so what I noticed with Anna Gasparian, with people who criticize the squad members, she'll use one or two things. She'll say that they're right wing, even though she'll know damn well that they're not. Or she'll say that they are threatening them. Unhinged, threatening them. Trying to make the protesters and trying to make the people who are criticizing, trying to make us look like the bad people instead of holding the squad accountable. TYT should have never took that $20 million. This whole channel has just gone downhill. But you see the problem, the class problem here? See the problem? Don't criticize them. Oh, I approve of direct action. I approve of these events. Those things are great. Never bring the organizers on to talk about it. Then they get mad because Jimmy did bring them on to talk about it. But you're not bringing them on to talk about it. Aye. All right, Eric, I think I'm going to take a break before the call-in segment. We're going to talk about this tonight on call-in, but you guys see the real problem though, right? You see where this is really coming from? Okie doke. I think we have to go through, you'll probably have to read the super chats, Eric. I don't think I got through those.
All right. We're going to talk about it tonight. All right, let's see. We got call-in. We got our call-in segment coming up. We're giving Sabby a little break before we jump into the call-in segment. And for call-in, you can do it either by hitting the link, which is posted on the chat, or you can bring up call-in on your on your phone as an app on the phone. The one thing I've found calling on the trying to run calling on a computer, at least on a PC, like on a Windows computer, is that it seems to run better under Chrome than it does under Firefox, at least from what I've seen, which is a shame because I'm much more of a fan of Firefox than Chrome. But sometimes you just gotta go with Chrome because of the way they do these things. All right, let's show some chats. We've had a whole bunch of chats come in. Thanks for this from Chris Deason. I posted a similar critique on this ridiculous Majority Report video. Sam's projection is uncanny. His interview with Brie showed him to be such a liar and a child. Yes, thanks for that, Chris. And from Luis, I'm still for force the vote. Yes, I mean, it's kind of a low bar. The whole force, just being for force the vote. It was kind of amazing. It was even a controversy. And also this again, also from Chris, thanks for this super chat. Sam said, all those force the vote people, what a piece of it. He was a force the vote person for 2 seconds. He's projecting AOC and keeping access to politicians. Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder with force the vote if how they were kind of for it at first, and then all of a sudden the people just kept dropping off of their support, and you got to wonder, what kind of phone calls were made and who talked to who. Thanks for this super chat from Andrew Matthews. Sam has a litmus test for voting and for being in the Democratic Party. What's he crying about litmus tests for? Indeed. And thanks for this super chat, No Wahala. They're using Jimmy as an excuse because they can't admit it's because they don't want to lose access to the squad. It's the real reason they didn't support it. Yep, I think so. Thanks for that. And thanks for this super chat from Chris Deason. Again, yes, force the vote is a litmus test for progressives. And thanks. Oh, he was in here twice. Well, if you gave it to us twice, thanks for the 2 super chats. And also thanks for this, Chris, super chat. I posted similar critique. So that's Sam's projection is uncanny. His interview showed him to be such a liar and a child. I'm not sure if these came in twice. You posted them twice, but thanks for the super chats. And thanks for this one. Sam said, all those force the vote people. And that's this one again. So maybe, I don't know if they came in twice or if they're just showing up here twice. But thanks for the super chat. Yes, he's protecting AOC and keeping access to politicians. And this from Andrew Sullivan. Seder is an ignorant, vapid apologist for a right-wing political party that pretends to oppose its bad cop twin. Well put, Andrew. And thanks for this super chat, AJF Milan. I think the PMC reformist left deliberately or succumbed to favor personality, popularity, gauging over tactics and policy values. Thanks for that. And thanks for this super chat, Chris. He knew the result. He's lying to keep access. I think talking about how Sam Seder was trying to claim how the force the vote would lead in terms of who became speaker, and saying he knew very well. And from Juliet, Sam has connections that he can't alienate. It's simple. Yes, well put, Juliet, in that chat. And thanks for this super chat, Sean. Jimmy Dore's voice and message is the only reason the left has begun to understand the grift of the Democrats. He may be aggressive, but he is a hero. Thanks for that chat. And this super chat, thanks from Andrew. Sam Seder equals milk toast. I got you. I got you, Andrew. I knew what you were doing there. Milk toast indeed. And thanks for those chats. And I hope everyone is doing well here on a Thursday. There's a little break for Sabby before she comes back, and we start our call-in. So let's see. This is a chance where I get a little time to say what I think of things. There was with the whole force the vote thing, I mean, one part of it was that it was just such a low bar. I mean, this stuff shouldn't have even been controversial. When it first came up, you had all these left voices saying, "Oh, it sounds like a pretty good idea" and whatnot, because it was obvious. And then it became a thing where the word came down that probably the squad members themselves probably put the word out saying, ixnay on the force the vote and stuff, and they just had to you either had to toe the line or you end up on the wrong side of it and you got ostracized. Now let's see, the other story we had a little earlier was the one on of course Desantis arresting people for voting, which is kind of amazing. And I think part of the whole thing is just they're always driving these things to be left-right fights, and I think we need to figure out a way to turn these into up-down fights and really be focusing on the economics and on and not get caught up in the left-right. Even MSNBC coming on and saying this is such a terrible thing, and so you got to vote blue. So we need to figure out how to make the fights about economics and fighting real power. And Kitty, thank you. All right.
Okay, I got to show that poll.
Oh yeah, the poll. Thank you. I forgot. All right. Let's look at the poll.
Let me
All right, I'll bring it up.
Okay. All right, cool. So I'm going to show you that poll, and then we're going to head on over to call in and have this discussion. Let me go ahead and show that topic here. So the call-in discussion tonight is episode 48, Force the Vote Revisited. Sam Seder has revised. I meant revisited. Oh, well. Revised Force the Vote and denies discussing it on anyone's show, but he did. Let's take a look back at Force the Vote. Did pushback from Sam and TYT host hurt the action? So that's going to be the discussion tonight on Call-In. Guys, by the way, I noticed this earlier today. I have reached 1,000 subs on Call-In. So thank you guys so much. My goal was to get to 1K. I honestly got faster to 1K on Call-In than I did on YouTube. It took me a while to get to 1K on YouTube. I'm not even going to lie. Okay, so here are those poll results. So let's go ahead and bring those little bad boys up. Okay. Are progressive politicians fighting for the working class? And these are the results here. 3% of you said yes. 91% said no. And 6% said you're not sure. Guys, look at these numbers. This is 756 votes. 91% of you said no. I think that rings loud and clear there. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the call-in link here in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and pin that message there. So it's pinned to the top of the live chat. It's also down there. Yeah, it's pinned to the top of the live chat. Join me over at Call-In. I got 3 minutes. I got to hurry up and get over there. You guys know how we do this. Come back tomorrow. Really great show. Don't forget, tune into the Activist Summit this weekend at RBN. Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be huge. We have so many different organizations and activists coming on. So if you're looking how to get involved and how you can make change in your community, you're definitely going to want to tune in. So I'll talk more about that tomorrow night. I am heading out, guys. Join me over at Call-In. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.